would be to introduce students to the very exciting and emerging field of digital ag, as we're all trying to collectively, as a community of agricultural researchers, trying to define it for ourselves. Using case studies and topics, journal articles, and discussion-oriented course that covers the agricultural sciences, engineering, and computer sciences, because I believe that these three main domains more or less cover the field of digital ag. And my pedagogical goal would be to enable a heterogeneous student population to collaborate across disciplines. So if this was an undergraduate class, I think it's really important for them to be able to, right away from the beginning, begin to talk to each other across disciplines, because this is a skill that will pay dividends for them for the rest of their career, no matter what field they end up going in, no matter what career path they end up choosing. And then I would like to create a learning environment in which students do have some ownership over their own learning experience. So to create some flexibility in the course structure. So I'll give you an example. So when I was at Cornell University as a PhD student, my major advisor went on sabbatical, and she left me with her course. And the only way that the department would allow a graduate student, because this is unheard of, to lead a course was if I were to make major changes to it. And this is a very sensitive thing, because you've got your advisor, and she's been doing this for 15 years. You don't want to overhaul all of it, because it's a little risky, and plus it's a lot of work. And so what I did was I kept probably 2/3 of the content the same, and I let the last 1/3 be a little bit more flexible and try to update that material. Then that course was called Plants, Genes, and Global Food Production. So it's quite a survey course in which we're talking about history, some of the social implications of agriculture, an introduction to plant breeding, as well as, let's think, IP associated with plant breeding. And then the last third, I try to modernize it and integrate some of this high throughput phenomics for plant breeding, model-based plant breeding, and then the implications of climate change on plant breeding. Okay, so that's kind of the way I approached it, was to keep part of the content the same, allow part of the content to be a little bit more flexible and updated. And then the major change that I made for that course was to overhaul the course format. So originally this was a lecture-based class. And I thought, well, first of all, it's hard for students to sit through just a pure lecture-based class throughout the whole semester. And secondly, for me, it's more fun to be more interactive. So the typical way that I would approach a undergrad class is to have at least one very activity-based, one hands-on activity per class. So whether that meant bringing things in and passing it around and discussing it, or turning around and having part lecture and then have a break and have breakout sessions in which students are discussing among themselves a topic that I put up, and then we discuss together as class. So this is something that's quite doable for a small class. This is under 20 people. And I would hope that an introduction to digital ag would be sort of a smallish class, that we would be able to do these types of hands-on activities. And then my targeted students for a class like this would be kind of diverse as well. So cutting across the agricultural sciences, animal sciences, crop sciences, soil sciences, ag econ, as well as engineering and computer science. So that's kind of a big ask. But then again, an introduction to digital agriculture is a big ask as well, and covers all of these disciplines. So, and of course, I think it's beyond the expectation of a single faculty member to be able to cover all of this. But these are my learning objectives for a course like this. And the first would be to set the stage, to describe the context of why we're doing something like this, why we're talking about digital ag. Discuss the history and social importance of agriculture. From the modeling side, learn the basics of crop systems dynamics modeling, how modelers derive equations and assemble them into computer simulation models, and what this can mean for digital ag. Learn about the state-of-the-art of ag IoT and organisms as sensors research. So this is, you can think about sensors that are on tractors and combines right now. John Deere has loads of them. Field monitors have been around for decades, actually. But we need to figure out what to do with that data. And then this organisms as sensors research. This is like using the cow or using the maize plant as sensors. So there's a lot of research going on right now about how we can get at in-depth physiological traits that can help us monitor the health and productivity of our plants as they grow in situ. And then finally, well actually, second to last, understand and discuss the current challenges of increasing accessibility to communications for digital ag. So this would be sort of the science, the computer science part of this digital ag course. So this is all great, the first two things, crop modeling and then for instance of sensors. But if we don't increase network connectivity, then none of it is really that useful for producers, because many of these farms are located in areas where we don't have a lot of access to broadband connection. So discussing some of the problems and challenges of getting, laying out physical cables for broadband connectivity or for cellular connectivity. And finally, appreciate the excitement and rewards of working in ag research. So I imagine if there was an engineer or a computer scientist undergrad who's wanting to take this course, they're wanting to try to get something more, trying to figure out where they can apply their skill set that maybe is not typical. There's a lot of engineers going into medical. Right now at my current University at Buffalo, I think I'm probably the only person interested in agriculture on my part of the campus. The other part is like 100% medical, but almost all of the university is, it's very medic-centric. And then I imagine that this would be a 3-instructor team, one modeler, an engineer, and a computer scientist, because it is a big ask for one instructor to cover all of those different, very diverse and divergent topics. And ideally, we would co-develop the curriculum together from the beginning, so it wouldn't be like, oh, okay, the ag person makes the curriculum, and then, okay, you just parachute in for 4 weeks and do your thing. Other guy parachutes in and does his thing. Really want this to be a very much a team teaching effort. And how do you do this? So it's sort of idealized, but how do you get faculty members to do this, to want to co-develop a curriculum together? And I think that's that's sort of why this call is out. Sorry, I'm losing my voice from talking for 14 hours yesterday. I guess this is part of why we have this digital ag cluster hire, right? Because you're wanting these faculty members to work together. So ideally that we would already be working together on research. So we would be friends and want to also co-develop this course so that we can start to build the next generation of researchers who can speak in a multilingual way across disciplines. And then also perhaps there would be opportunity here in this class for invited guest lectures, because there's still some topics that's not in the wheelhouse of either three, for instance in ag econ. Okay, so this is a potential flow of the course syllabus. So beginning with the context and the why, setting the scene and really bringing up, sort of laying out a baseline level of understanding across this diverse group of students. So for instance, especially important for the engineers, I think, and the computer scientists. And then, so this I imagine would be led by the agronomy digital ag hire. And then going into theme 1, which is the data and analytics. So this is the modeling. Again, with the agronomy hire. The theme 2 would be sensors and technology, and this could be someone in ABE, agricultural and biological engineering. And then finally, theme 3 could be led by the computer scientist. And then leaving a little bit at the end for perhaps specialty topics, or sometime at the end of the semester if we chose to assign a term project. So this could be an opportunity for the students to come up and present as well what they've learned. And in a 15-week course, we could break it down. This is just a suggestion. You could have 2 weeks for setting the context, and if it was a 3-lecture per week class, it would be 6 lectures, so that's the number of parentheses. And going down, each theme would kind of cover 1 month, so 4 weeks or 12 lectures. And then finally 1 week for the specialty topics or the term projects. And some suggestions for specialty topics, we could invite a producer out and give his perspective or her perspective on digital ag from a farmer's perspective. The policy and socioeconomics of digital ag adoption. So many of these technologies that we're developing, how do we get them really in the market? Digital ag for the developing world. We want to ensure that the deployment and development of digital ag innovation, it serves to narrow the gaps between agriculture in the developing world and the developed world. So something I mentioned yesterday. And then also digital innovation to decrease environmental impact. So I think these are things that really would highlight the strengths of the agronomy department and the College of Ag in general. And so many opportunities to bring in faculty from across the college and across agronomy. Okay, so that being said, so that's sort of like what I envision a course like this to how it might take shape, and then going into a little mini lecture. It's lecture 1-ish, because it's not really what I would do for an undergrad class. I would really want to, get you guys up and talking and doing things together, but that's sort of risky for an interview prospect. So the question is, what was digital agriculture before the digital revolution? And I thought I would give a little historical perspective to sort of set the stage in about 20 minutes. But then I realized when I was putting this together that it's really not a historical perspective of agriculture, it's really a plant breeding historical perspective. And then, because I worked in rice for about 12 years, it became very rice-centric. So now it's a rice-centric plant breeding historical perspective in 20 minutes, but this is what I've got. So if we think of the digital framework, we can think of it as encompassing 3 main areas: data and analytics, sensors and technology, and systems and accessibility. And so these are the themes that we will cover in this course. Okay, so everyone know what that is? I actually saw many people wearing these yesterday. Yep. So this is a Fitbit or so, it doesn't matter what it is, but there are many of these types of sensors that we can wear on our wrists to monitor many different aspects of our day-to-day lives, right? So a friend's sister gave me one of these a few weeks ago, and I started wearing it. I don't have it here because I didn't want to see my heart rate during the interview. But here's some data that I pulled from when I logged into my Fitbit account, and so it's giving me like resting heart rate, and you can see there's 1 point per day, right? So this is April 1st, and this is April 12th. Got 1 point per day. There's a little bit of oscillation. Not sure what's going on over here. But where does this come from? Because during the course of the day, there's got to be a lot of variation, right? So I went in, and it's actually harder than I thought. I pulled out the data from April 4th a couple weeks ago, and this was what my day on April 4th looked like. So here, this is every minute data, every minute of heart rate. So here I'm asleep. That's nice. Pretty low, bad dreams here. But then I woke up around 5:30 that day and went for a run with my running group. So nice leisurely jog. And then for the rest of the day, I sort of, pounded the keyboard at my computer with a couple of bathroom breaks and running off to a meeting kind of late. But the question is, this is the data. This is what the raw data looked like, and how did they get this ready? So something had to happen in between there, and something also had to happen in between here. So this is how we can.
Do you drink coffee?
Yes, I drink so much coffee, especially today and yesterday. that was a weekend.
So will you send us a report of your unfiltered data?
I'm not wearing it because I really didn't want to know. So if we apply this digital framework, or if we can plug this into the digital framework, we can think of this, the Fitbit and my iPhone, as the sensors and technology. Okay, so the sensor is collecting data. What are these data? These are minute-by-minute heart rate data. And then there's some sort of model that spits out this resting heart rate, right? And then, of course, how is everything connected? Well, through Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, broadband, and then this data exists somewhere in the cloud in Fitbit. So the question really that we're trying to address in this course is, how can we leverage that digital framework for agriculture? And for me, in order to try to imagine where we're going, I need to know where we came from. And so here's my little mini lecture. So the origins of how we humans, again, this is a plant breeding rice-centric perspective, so the origins of how we humans started to change the evolutionary path of the plants that we depend on started way long ago. When we first began transitioning from a hunter-gatherer society, like this one shown here, the Stone Age hunters, to one based on farming. And this was known as the Neolithic Revolution. This began about 10,000 years ago, give or take a few thousand years, and involved the domestication of the major crop species that we depend on. So we have maize in Mexico, potato in the Andes, wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent, and rice in Asia. And so these very early human domesticators, they preserved and propagated the plants that had favorable traits for them. Okay, so So for instance, they selected plants that held the seeds on in terms of that, at least for the cereals, but I think it holds true for other crops. Because in the wild, you can imagine that wild cereals, they need to be able to disseminate their seeds so that they would, at maturity, they would flick off, they would shatter. So early humans started collecting the seeds that were non-shattering, and this was initially unintentional. They could only save the seeds that didn't fall off the plants before they harvested, right? But this had major implications, so this eventually led to big genetic changes over time. And eventually, domesticated crops looked and tasted and behaved very differently from their wild ancestors. And these physical differences are due to genetic differences. So I don't need to tell this crowd in Indiana what this is, right? This is Teosinte. It is the ancestor of modern day maize. We can see many differences between Teosinte and maize. We see that Teosinte tillers a lot, so it has many different stems, whereas our modern day maize only has one. If we look at the ears, this looks pretty tasty right here, and this is not so much. So the ear structure is quite different. So Teosinte produces, I think, it produces 2 rows of seeds, and our modern day corn produces 8 to 12. Am I right?
No.